Hey there, welcome to AP Comp Gov Writing Bootcamp Day 2. I'm going to talk at you a little bit about good and bad thesis statements for the purposes of this argument essay, and then I'm going to send you off to do your very first practice essay by your own self. So just a couple words first about thesis statements, and I want to walk you through some scored samples for the prompt that we looked at yesterday about corruption fighting in democratic versus authoritarian regimes. Just a reminder that the question there is to develop an argument for why either an authoritarian or a democratic regime type is more effective at reducing corruption. And the three required concepts are that you have to use at least one of civil liberties or civil society organizations or elections. And of course, you can use two or all three if you'd like. One other thing that might be helpful is the language from the College Board's rubric for thesis statements, which is that a successful thesis responds to the prompt with a defensible claim or thesis that establishes a line of reasoning. Those are the three things that you want to look for: a relevance, a claim, and a line of reasoning, almost always indicated by the word because. So let's look at three samples. The first is pretty basic. Authoritarian regimes are better than democratic regimes at reducing corruption. And if I look back to my rubric language, I find that that does two things, but not the third. It does respond to the prompt, and I know that because it uses almost all the words from the prompt. It does make a defensible claim or thesis because it takes a side on the question posed by the prompt, but it does not establish a line of reasoning, and I know that because nowhere do I see the word because. So let's look at a second, slightly wordier example. This one says, democratic and authoritarian regimes differ with respect to their treatment of civil liberties, such as freedom of speech, press and assembly, and electoral participation. Pause there. I've used a bunch of fancy words from the prompt, and I've used a couple of those required concepts from my usual list of three. So far looking promising. And then this author concludes, consequently, they are not equally effective in reducing corruption. Problem here, this thesis does address the subject of the prompt, talks about corruption, uses a bunch of words from the prompt, which I'm sure is something that your English teachers have been telling you to do since time immemorial. And it even invokes those concepts, kind of looking for some bonus points or looking to foreshadow the argument. But the problem is that this author never actually takes a side. They never say whether a democratic or an authoritarian regime type is more effective at corruption fighting. And therefore, this isn't going to get the point, because it does not make a claim or a thesis that addresses the prompt. It just talks about it a lot. You want to watch out for this, especially if your default approach to writing a thesis statement is to restate the prompt using as many words from the prompt as possible, because it is possible, especially with wordy prompts like these, to get caught up in restating the prompt and forget to actually add any value of your own to actually state the argument that you are going to make in your essay. So please don't fall into that trap. Last one, democratic regimes are more effective than authoritarian regimes at reducing corruption because democratic regimes allow for greater citizen participation through elections and a more active civil society. This one ticks all the boxes. It responds to prompts, it establishes a claim, it takes a particular side, and it previews that line of reasoning, and I know that because it uses that word because. That's all I wanted to say about thesis statements. If you are following along at home, at this point, what you want to do is go to Google Classroom or go to the Google site, either one should work, and open up the link to submit your practice argument essay. If you are planning to take the AP exam, it is my strong recommendation that you time yourself to 25 minutes and make yourself stop writing as soon as that 25-minute timer goes off, because that's the amount of time you're going to have on the online exam. Please submit that in time for me to give you some feedback. I'll turn that around as quickly as possible. Deadline is posted on my website and on Google Classroom. Thanks.